let me guys give you a good walk around of this Firebird. And let me explain to you what my last Firebird build kind of persisted of, and how this one is going to vary. My last Firebird, if you guys took a look back at it, it was a 1982 Firebird that I ended up almost getting for free. I traded a 400 Ford big block for it, and I had no use for the Ford, I had no use for the transmission, I had no use for any of it. So the wife and I, we loaded up on a Sunday and we drove to Sarnia. My house from Sarnia is about 5 hours, maybe a little bit more. So we drove all the way to Sarnia. We traded that motor and transmission to a gentleman and we got ourselves a non-running, really rotted 82 Firebird. And when I got that Firebird home, we actually were able to completely disassemble that car and store everything. We stored the front bumper, we stole the hood, all the door panels, T-tops. Basically everything off that car was taken off that car and stored. It had a 350 LT1 that was completely torn apart in it, and it was no good. So we ended up just scrapping that the LT1, and I believe we put it in the back of a Ford Cougar. Yes, we put it in the back of a Ford Cougar. But what I ended up doing was putting a 2.3 Mustang motor into it. I ended up putting a 79 Mustang rear bumper on the front of it that was loaded. Because I had sold the hood, I actually put a Roadmaster hood on the car, and it actually fit beautifully. It actually fit all the way down the body lines and ended right at the rad support, so I was pretty happy about that. Once we sold the hood, I actually did sell the seats. So without no seats in it, I had to put Volvo seats into it. And I actually sold the rear hatch, so I actually put a Sundance hatch in the back of it. So it was known as the Monstrosity. It looked like a Firebird from the outside, but it had everything else on it. Some guy asked me, well, what happens if somebody wanted the doors? I said, well, then I would have welded Cavalier doors on it, just to make me that bit different. And it was a fun car. It was fun to build. It was a very big learning experience for me because I had never built anything like that before. This was my first domestic rear-wheel drive Mini I had ever built. I learned a lot from it. I learned that a car that was T-top and the complete floors were rotted out of it is not a good demolition derby car. The first time I put it up on the hoist, all the rear suspension fell out of it. It was a horribly rotted car. And I said to myself, if I ever got another one that wasn't rotted, I would put much better care into building it. So what we have here is a very lightly rotted 86 Firebird. And this one's a lot different. This one here has a factory 6-cylinder into it, but unfortunately this motor has a knock, and it's fuel injected, and I don't trust it. I did end up buying myself a 2.8 propane. I will just have to put a carburetor onto it, but I'm fine with that. I don't know a whole lot of history on these 2.8 GMs. I know that they fall into the 60-degree category, which means they run the same kind of block design as a 3100, 33, 38, 34, 2.8, which is this one. So I'm hoping that maybe I can try to put some hood headers on this. I have a buddy that runs a lot of Luminas, so maybe I can try to borrow a set of headers off him and hopefully we don't destroy them. Maybe I might have to buy them and then sell them to him when I'm done, who knows. But we are going to put a 2.8 carbureted into this car because this fuel injection is crap. The one thing I did note on my last one is that everything came into the steering box. So I'm going to try to see if there's anything I can do to stop the frame rails from coming into that steering box. What I do like is how much space is between the radiator and the actual motor. So I'd like to keep that space pretty much the same. Now, a lot of you guys that don't know, these cars only have a wheelbase of 101.9. Now that is smaller than Cavalier, Neon, Mustang. Actually, I'm pretty sure Mustangs are about the same. This is like 4 inches shorter than a Toyota Camry. These cars are unbelievably short wheelbase, and I find in a small track, you can spin these cars around pretty easily in a small track for a rear-wheel drive car. Volvos you can't spin around that easily. Even with a welded diff you can, but you have to have your speed up. I find these ones actually turn very sharp for the size of car they are. And when you bring a car like this and you tell everybody that it's Mini, A lot of people still want you to run full size. I've actually been to the one demolition derby where they had 2 separate lineups for tech inspection. One was mini car and one was full size. And I was told 4 times by the tech officials that I was in the wrong lineup. And I had to tell each one of them that this is a mini car. And I had to explain to them the wheelbase and the motor selection, and that's why I was mini. But anyway, that's a different story. Once you take off these nose cones on the front of the car, you're basically losing 2 feet off the front of this car. You have to cut the hood, or you can fold the hood down in front of the rad support. But once you lose the front 2 feet of a car, that makes these cars look a lot shorter than once they are. You have to fold the fenders in. I bolt the fenders to the core supports. The T-tops are going to be a little bit of a problem. Last time what I did was I ran flat bar across the openings on the outside, each side of the windshield, and then I put mesh over top of it, just because you have to fill in the T-tops. The rear hatch is basically all glass with a little 1 foot wide piece of steel at the back of it. So I might try to just bolt in another car's trunk. I might take a trunk off of like one of these minivans I have here, or maybe even the HHR trunk, and try bolting it to the roof and bolting it to the floor. See if I can do something like that, acting as in the rear trunk's been crushed to the floor. We'll see. I'm not 100% sure what I am allowed to do as of yet. If I can't do that, I'm probably going to run with no rear hatch at all, and maybe a back window bar just from the floor area to the roof, because that is now a 5 foot wide, 2.5, 3 foot tall opening where the cars could come in and hit me, and I don't want that. I want something in between, that if a car does ramp up on the back end, that it does not hurt me inside the car, which is not a bad request. Well, let's get going through this car, and I can show you what it looks like in the inside as of right now. So this is a pretty cool car. Everything about this car screams 1986 to me. And for you guys that are a little bit too young to know what 1986 was, even myself, believe it or not, born in 88, 1986 was the time of mullets, shitty clothes, and mustaches. Something about this car just wants me to grow a 2 foot long mullet, the most greasiest porn stash that you can imagine, and wear some really crappy clothes that are full of colors. And nah, get rid of the clothes. I don't want to wear that clothes. Let's go to the inside. I'm actually pretty sure I could rock one of these things on the road. Now, the interior of this is not in the best of shape, and it actually smells like mold and mice. So, any of you guys know what mold and mice smells like? It's not exactly a fantastic smell. It's got those things down there that are apparently supposed to keep out the mice, but I'm pretty sure the mice have been trying to eat at them. Oh. I'm pretty sure I could drive one of these cars. So we have our iconic Firebird steering wheel with the horn in the middle, headlights, interior lights. Look at this. Look at all the gauges we used to have. The gauges used to take up half the dash. I remember a day when gauges were popular in cars. Now it's all digital. Look at the factory radio. Is that a... It doesn't look like a cassette tape. Oh, it does. You put it, instead of putting the cassette tape in lengthwise, you put it in widthwise. That's a little different. Our automatic transmission. We will be keeping this transmission into this car, so it'd be nice to kind of take this out nicely, maybe. Come up with a different style shifter. I don't know how reliable this shifter is. Glove box was just a piece of leather that you could... I guess that was not designed for a cell phone because they didn't have cell phones in 1986. But, yeah, glove box is not really known to be the most durable thing on these cars. We're not going to keep any of this. None of the carpet, none of the dash, none of the door panels. But one of the cool things I do like is the T-tops. Nothing says cool like taking your T-tops off. Oh, let's just try to keep the snow out of here a little bit longer. Nah, snow's going to come in no matter... Oh, I got it! Yes, T-tops locked in. I give up on that trunk. The keys are not fitting in that hole. I'll have to smash it out with a screwdriver. In the weeks to come, maybe I'll wait till it's inside to actually take that out. But what I wanted to show you guys is how the back of this car is set up. It's a lot different than cars these days. So if you take a look, fold these seats forward, that is the hump where your rear axle goes. So there's not a whole lot of trunk space in these cars. And that's what I'm saying, if I take the back glass off, there's like a 5 foot wide, 2 foot tall hole for cars to come inside the car. So I'd like to take a bar from the back window to the rear floor to try to close that window off a bit. I'm not sure if where I'm going to take it's going to allow it, but by golly, I'm going to do it because I definitely do not want a car smashing the top of my head off. So that's a tour of this car, and it is actually a lot less rotted than my last one. It's got a little bit of rot right here in the pillars. The floors are a little punky, but every Camaro Firebird from the 80s I've ever seen needs floor patches. Other than that, the car looks really good. There's 2 small holes in the rear subframe, but it's just where water builds up. The first thing that we're going to do is basically de-dress the front of this car. Get the front bumper off, get the battery into the scrap pile because that battery's garbage, get the washer fluid bottle out, cut the fuel lines out of it because I'm not running the factory tank. Basically just gut the entire underneath of this hood and get rid of everything I don't need and everything I don't want. So let's go get the dumpster van. I hooked up the battery booster to this car and it will not start it. So we're going to go to the backup plan. And if any of you guys ever want an amazing battery to start every car in your yard, I'm going to tell you what you do. Go buy yourself a shitty 1992 to 2017 Honda Civic. Usually you can pick them up pretty cheap for scrap. The secret is you buy yourself a $100 Honda Civic, make sure that it starts, runs, and drives, and then you take it straight into the scrapyard and you keep yourself that battery. These Honda Civic batteries are one of the most amazing batteries I've ever seen. They're so tiny, they fit underneath the hood of just about every car. I've never ever found a hood that these things don't fit in. Let me correct that. If the battery's in the back of the car, it doesn't fit underneath the hood. It fits into the back of the car. I know I'd get a smart comment like that. Look at it. I'm going to turn this off. I just put this Honda Civic battery in there. Let's see if this van will start up. Honda Civic batteries are amazing. They fit in every car and they start just about every car. I've actually done a demolition derby with a 2003 Crown Vic, and the only battery inside the car was a Honda Civic battery. And it started that car all day, every day, never once, ever gave me a problem. That's my battery tip of the day, is buy a Honda Civic battery. Well, the dumpster van is here. Let's see if it can live up to its name and be filled up with garbage. But first, we have to take some garbage actually out of this thing. My neighbor was tearing out his furnace, so I went over to help him because he said I could have the entire furnace for scrap. Said it worked fine, he was just switching to natural gas. Turns out his furnace and my furnace were the exact same furnace. So I pretty much saved everything I could to make sure that my house stays nice and warm. One man's scrap is another man's treasure, right?